What's going on, everybody? It is that time again. The Sooners Illustrated Podcast, episode 138 on this Friday, December 20th, 2024. Josh Callaway, Collin Kennedy with you on a Friday. No drink this time? You don't have a drink? Take a sip of it?
I forgot my little stadium cup, unfortunately. I'm all out of sorts right now.
Collin coming to us live from AT&T Stadium in Arlington, Texas, where he's down there for Texas High School Football State Championship games. We're in between the early game and the afternoon game. We're squeezing the show in. Collin taking some time. As we have a lot of portal stuff to talk about. Obviously, we did the instant reaction show on Wednesday after John Mateer got in the boat. We decided to then wait an extra day and do the show on Friday because we knew there would be more movement post the Mateer signing, and there was. So we've got a number of portal commits to talk about on the program today. And we'll also look at what's next for you in the portal as some other targets still hanging out there. They've missed on a couple that we'll recap. And then where do they go from here as they look to kind of refine this portal class as they kind of add those last few bodies before getting into spring ball and stuff like that. So, Collin, without further ado, let's dive into it. A lot of portal stuff. Let's start with cleaning up the John Mateer commitment on Wednesday. Obviously, we did the instant reaction show. Anyone who missed that, it's not going anywhere. It's still in the podcast feed, still on the YouTube channel to kind of get our full, kind of drawn out thoughts on Oklahoma landing John Mateer and what it means both short term and long term. But I did want to ask you, just in these first couple of days, he signed on Wednesday night. We've seen Oklahoma make some additions since then. Just kind of wrap it up for us on the John Mateer front and what kind of an impact he's already making on the portal side. Because it just feels like if you're Oklahoma, it almost probably was hard to really focus on anything else until you got the quarterback settled. Now that you have it settled, how are things kind of moving the last couple of days since they got John Mateer in the boat?
Yeah, the best thing that you can do in any level of recruiting is to flip the sense of urgency. And what I mean by that is Oklahoma went into this portal window with its own sense of urgency, right? Mm-hmm. They knew the task at hand. They knew what had to be addressed. They knew the problems that they had and how they needed to go about fixing it. But it's the execution portion that creates that urgency. But, man, when you're able to flip that switch and suddenly kind of put some urgency in the players you're recruiting, that's where you want to be. And I think that was created whenever John Mateer officially joined the mix. We hinted at it in the instant reaction. It was not coincidental that Oklahoma suddenly chose to have all these portal wide receivers visit campus around the same time John Mateer was visiting. And I think you saw that kind of pay off. We're going to talk about all those guys here in a second, but the long and short of it is when these guys see an elite quarterback land at a particular destination, we talk about it all the time in high school recruiting, that's now the face of said program in their eyes. And they have to evaluate whether or not they want to play with a player like that. And the bottom line is a lot of these guys really do, especially players in the portal who only have so many years left. Sure. They want to know that the most is going to be made of their career down the final stretch. And a lot of that obviously has to do with the quarterback position. So John Mateer sent shockwaves throughout the college football landscape. But in this winter window of the portal specifically, it's been massive. It's created a ton of momentum behind the scenes, and you're starting to see it pay off, obviously, as Oklahoma continues to add alongside Mateer himself.
Yeah, I agree. It really feels like Oklahoma has got momentum, finally. The first week after the LSU game, all the guys hopped in the portal, and it was all these, question marks. Who's going to be back on this team? What can they do in the portal? They were slow out of the gates, relatively. Obviously, fans want results in the portal immediately. You were a week in, and your only addition was the punter, Jacob Ulrich, and you were still just watching guys walk out the door. But it's like, Saturday night, they got Deion Burks to announce his return. They got a couple of portal bodies. There seemed to be some good movement for John Mateer. And now it feels like the floodgates are open and the tide is turning, right? Like they have momentum finally. And you're seeing that with what they've done this week already with, hopefully more to come. And we'll talk about that later on in the program. But, it's been a much more positive week around here than it had been the last couple, which is good for OU fans and good for us to have some better things to talk about other than just guys walking out the door. So on that note, let's go ahead and get into some of the guys they've added this week. It's been busy, as Collin very well knows. They've been very active, getting guys into campus for visits, getting guys locked down. More to come, but let's start with the guys they have nailed down, starting with Javonnie Gibson. We're going to go in chronological order here. Arkansas Pine Bluff wide receiver. You know, I feel like I say this a few times, and we're going to say it a couple more times. You look at where he comes from, and there will be that natural. Is a guy from Arkansas Pine Bluff going to be able to make the transition to the SEC? I'll let Collin answer that better than me, but what I will say for Javonnie Gibson, the dude had a massive season. I mean, 70 catches for 1,200 yards and 9 touchdowns. Arkansas Pine Bluff's statistics this year are hilarious because he's got almost 1,000 more yards than the next closest guy. He was their offense, essentially. And other teams obviously know that, and it still didn't matter. Javonnie Gibson was incredibly effective this year for Arkansas Pine Bluff. Talk about the player, Collin, and the question that's going to be asked for all of these guys: what kind of an impact immediately can be expected from Javonnie JV Gibson?
Yeah, so you mentioned some of the stats: 70 catches, 1,215 yards.
Crazy.
That was second in all the FCS. 9 touchdowns, but then on top of that, this guy, first team all SWAC at one point in the season, Josh, led all the FCS in receiving yards per game, and yards per reception. That's crazy to think about. All the FCS, that guy at one point this year was the leader in all those categories. I really do believe that this guy is going to translate pretty effectively to the SEC. Now, listen, am I saying that he's going to go for 1,200 plus yards? Of course not. That would be ridiculous. But watching the tape the other day, man, I turn it on and I'm looking at this guy. The release work off the line, he gets off the ball in a hurry. He makes corners look a little bit silly if they're in press coverage, stacks them effectively. I'm watching some of these plays, the explosives he's creating, and I'm going, he'd be making these plays if he were wearing an Oklahoma uniform. Now, depending upon which opponent is a natural sort of outlier, but I was really impressed when I watched the film, and I could see the vision here too, because for Oklahoma, you're assuming that Jaden Gibson's going to be coming back. That's your 6'5" big vertical threat.
Sure.
But in Javonnie, like, the first thing I kind of thought of was, okay, you get into some stuff where you run this guy on a deep post or something skinny over the top, and you have Deion Burks underneath in the slot. You play some levels. That's lethal, man, because the other thing that I really liked about Javonnie's game, man, he's got some juice. Like, he's explosive, and I think he is just as much a vertical threat as he is someone who can create after the catch. And I'm not making this comp specifically, just for some of the roll stuff, some of the route combinations and things like that. I'm sitting there like, man, you could maybe do a little bit of D.D. Westbrook stuff with this guy, because he's long, athletic, speedy, explosive, but he can create a little bit. I'm not saying that's the player comparison. I just think from a role perspective, there's a lot of utilization coming for Javonnie Gibson. And I was watching the film and I thought, yeah, it's not taking me long to figure out why OU likes this guy. And so to get him over contenders like Oklahoma State, Mississippi State, Cincinnati, Virginia Tech, a few other Power Fours, like, that's the other part of this equation as well. We can talk about how effective he was in the FCS and what he kind of shows you on tape, but a lot of other programs had a similar evaluation. You get it signed, sealed, and delivered. The Sooners are getting a really good one in this receiver core, Josh.
For sure. And like you said, you got Jaden Gibson back in the fold, which hopefully he can respond back from, his tough injury this year that sat him out for the whole year. But this is where it ties back into, again, getting Deion Burks back. You're not looking for any of these guys that we're going to talk about to come in and be your number one. You're coming in looking for them to be productive and reliable options for you. Deion Burks is your number one. You've got that sewn up. So that's where his return so positively impacts all these other guys that we're going to talk about, with Javonnie Gibson right in the mix there. Also having two, are they going to have to go J-A-Y Gibson, J-A-V Gibson on the jersey?
I did a I did a live stream the night of the Mateer commitment. Obviously, Javonnie Gibson had been committed by that time.
Yeah.
And I was talking with Jay Smith over at Unfair Sports. We were chopping it up, and he made a great point. He was like, I feel bad for Toby Rowland because double Jay Gibson, and they're basically probably going to be playing the exact same receiver role, too, within this offense. Hilarious stuff. The similar situation with the Thunder too, though, right? So it's nothing new to the state.
We're used to it around here for sure. We're definitely used to it around here. It's at least not the exact same name like the Thunder have. And it's not like Jaden's obviously a very tall guy, but Javonnie's 6'3". I mean, it's not like so we'll see. But,
he looked every bit of 6'3" too. And while we're on tangent, shout out to the random guy that just walked into the podcast. I don't know who you are, man, but welcome to the show. Whoever it was that wanted to take a picture.
He's now part of Sooners Illustrated podcast lore forever. Sticking to the wide receiver room, we knew they were going to be very aggressive at this position, obviously, with all the turnover and just the struggles that position had this year. So you got Javonnie Gibson in, didn't take long. You made another one with Keontez Lewis from Southern Illinois, another guy who was really productive. I know, again, coming from a lower level, but 49 catches, 790 yards, 5 touchdowns. He's formerly of Wisconsin, where he also had some success in the Big Ten with the Badgers a couple of years ago in 2022, 20 catches, 300-plus yards, few touchdowns. So, he's played at the big boy level and done some nice things as well. 6'2", so another bigger guy. What does Keontez Lewis bring to the table in your estimation? And this one where did this one come from as Oklahoma got him into town and seemingly got this one done kind of quick? I guess you could speak to that better than me, but it seemed like this one came together kind of fast.
Yeah, so I think Keontez Lewis is arguably the most intriguing or interesting addition because this will be his 4th school. And I saw that and I got a little worried. I'm not going to lie to you. Let's be transparent here. I saw 4th school for this guy and thought, I don't know. What are we doing? But I want to set the table here with at least attempting to tell the story of this guy. So Keontez Lewis, folks, he starts at UCLA to begin his career. And he actually ends up playing in 11 games during the 2021 season, 11 game appearances, and produced 0 receiving statistics.
Right.
And so you see a young player like that earn a lot of playing time at a Power 4 program and think, okay, there's got to be something there, but they never got him the ball. So he enters the portal, and from what I can gather, doing my research, he went into the portal wanting to earn more of an opportunity in the passing game. So he goes to Wisconsin, and like you mentioned, he had a really good year with the Badgers. Shortly thereafter, produces at a pretty high level, stands out. I believe he ended up being 3rd in receptions for them back at that time after the season ended. And so he contributes for the Badgers. But after that year, where he kind of breaks out almost, Josh, Wisconsin apparently added 4 new receivers and recruited over him and bumped him to the 2nd unit. And after that, Lewis only had 1 catch the following season after that kind of breakout campaign. Right. And so this guy is, he's riding the roller coaster. He goes back into the portal, lands at Southern Illinois, and produces to the level like you mentioned.
Big season, yeah.
So I'm learning about his path, and I think, okay, this guy he's not going into the portal for the wrong reasons. If you think about it, he earns time as a young player. That's hard to do and isn't rewarded, wants to better himself. He earns more of an opportunity at Wisconsin and then suddenly gets recruited over. He says, well, I feel like I deserve to play. I put up the statistics to be deserving, goes back in the portal and produces again. And so all that to say, I do my research and I battle back and forth on this, and then I watch the film. And Josh, I'm going to be honest with you. Before I turned on the tape, I went in kind of going, I don't think I'm going to like this guy. I really thought, I'm not going to like what I see. I did. It was hard for me not to really like some of the stuff that he put on tape. The long and short of it, I basically put on every play where he was either positively or negatively graded. And coming out of those cut-ups, I thought, I don't see a lot of negatives, man. And Yes, it's Southern Illinois. But
Sure.
when you consider he kind of replicated some of the success at the Power 4 level in the Big Ten, no less. I like this get, man. I don't think that this guy is going to be kind of like you mentioned, your wide receiver one. But I think the best way I can phrase it is I get it. Like, I get why you would go after a guy coming from Southern Illinois. I can see the vision here for the Sooners. I think it's a pretty savvy eval by Emmett Jones. And this is the kind of player who I feel either he gives you another body, which was needed, or, man, we look back on this podcast going, remember when we were talking about Keontez, Lewis? Because he's got some of that ability to him.
Yeah, I'm very intrigued by Lewis. And like you said, I mean, he's had success. He's a Power 5 player, Power 4, I guess, these days. He is. I know he's coming from Southern Illinois now, but he's shown on multiple occasions, whether it's from his recruitment and obviously landing at Wisconsin in the portal, and then what he did at Wisconsin, especially in 2022, like we said, that he can hang at the higher level of college football. And he went and had a great year at Southern Illinois, and now he's looking to come in and make something happen here in Norman. So I think it's another nice fit. And obviously you let Emmett Jones, who's proven to be a very good developer, again, kind of the same thing. I feel like I'm repeating myself because I am. You're not looking for these guys to come in and be your number one. Come in, a rotational body, and be another reliable option for you. And I feel like Keontez Lewis certainly has that in him to do that. And so look forward to all these guys, but look forward to seeing him in spring ball and all that good stuff when the time comes. Obviously, wide receiver, major position of need. That was known. And there's another one that we're going to talk about in a moment, but another big position of need that obviously well known along the offensive line. So they added Luke Baklenko from Stanford, talked about him earlier in the week. Another guy they got into the fold was Western Carolina's Derek Simmons. Now, Derek Simmons is one that we did talk about, you and I, on the podcast last Thursday as a potential target, and they did get it done. They brought him in. Big guy, had lots of offers. The graphic with the offers on it has been making the rounds because it's just a million logos. He was very highly sought after. Another guy who can play tackle for you. Obviously, Baklenko played a lot of right tackle for Stanford. You feel like you've got Logan Howland, probably your left tackle, probably. We'll see how things shake out, but you need to find that other tackle. Here's another option in Derek Simmons. We talked about it a little bit last week, Collin, but now that he's in the fold, could you see Derek Simmons being a starting tackle for Oklahoma next year? I mean, talk about what kind of a pickup this could be and how much of a role he could potentially have right away for Oklahoma and Bill Bedenbaugh.
I could see him being a starting tackle or a starting guard, and I'll explain why. Derek Simmons, I talked about it, big-bodied but versatile. He played a lot of snaps at left tackle, right tackle, and some at right guard at Western Carolina. And he's had a unique career path to get to this point, but this past season at Western Carolina, incredibly effective, finished, according to Pro Football Focus, with an 80.6 offensive player grade along with an 82.3 pass protection grade, which, again, Western Carolina, you want to take that with a grain of salt. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, those are numbers you really can't ignore. I think when you consider how he translates, I love the fact that he gets into a stance. He's compact. He fires out. He's into his pass set quickly. And he's held up well against some pretty good competition. I believe that they played against NC State this past season, and I believe he handled himself pretty effectively. And I think whether you're asking him to push Luke Baklenko and Jake Taylor over on the right side, or you're asking him to push guys like Logan Howland, Jacob Sexton over on the left side, Michael Fasusi maybe. But then there's maybe even the world where he helps kind of push Fabechi Wiwu and Eddie Pierre-Louis at right guard. A guy we'll talk about here in a second, whenever you kind of miss out on some other offensive line targets and you see a guy out here like this who almost everyone in the country wants, and you can utilize him in a number of different ways, and you almost kind of get that NFL swing tackle role in a player like this, I totally understand why Oklahoma was really excited about Derek Simmons. And I think that this is, again, a player who could carve out a role in a number of different places and push a lot of the players already in that room.
And let's also call it like it is. Phenomenal aesthetic. He's a big dude. He's tatted up. He just looks like he's going to move people. He
had the back plate hanging out like a running back. Yeah. You know what I mean? And I thought, this guy gets it. He wants to look good in all those pictures they're taking of him.
I assume it's his father with him in the photos, rocking a mean national champions like throwback jacket, throwing the horns down. Really solid photo shoot. Credit to the Simmons family. Knocked it out of the park. Knocked out of the park. I got excited, more excited for him just from the photos alone. So Derek Simmons in, again, a potential tackle option or guard option. I mean, I do think this is a guy who is going to be in the mix for major snaps. And obviously we'll see. You never know. There's a lot of options, a lot of young guys coming up in year two, and potentially more portal additions to come. But I would envision us talking about Simmons more throughout spring ball and moving into next season as well. Sticking on the offense, that's a common theme. All these portal additions, in fact, all of them other than the punter, Jacob Ulrich, have been on the offense. Another one in the wide receiver room yesterday from Arkansas. So here's your SEC transfer for the people who are dying for a move from within the league. You got it here with Isaiah Sategna, comes over from the Razorbacks, where Gibson and Lewis are more your big body guys. Sategna a little more on the smaller side, 5'11", a speedster, had a good season with the Razorbacks, 37 catches for 491 yards, had a 58-yarder mixed in there this year. Talk about Sategna, and am I right in that estimation of he kind of gives you a little something different than what Gibson and Lewis might, and he could maybe be the backup slot behind Burks? Is that, I mean, where are you kind of viewing Sategna and how he kind of fits in here?
I think this is your replacement for Brennan Thompson. I think this is I don't want this to come off as a slight to the player, but this is probably someone who could have a higher ceiling than Brennan Thompson, and he can contribute in a number of different ways as well. I think he can be someone who supplements Deion Burks well in the slot. I think he can play on the perimeter as well. I also think the big thing to know with him, punt return capability. If you're looking for someone with a lot of speed who can go back there and be effective in the third phase of the game, I think Sategna brings that to the table. And look, Josh, let's just call it like it is. Oklahoma, I don't want to say it's a need at punt returner, but just having someone back there who may be a little bit more comfortable, you know what I'm saying? Like, I think Sategna could probably bring that. I know he had a punt return for a touchdown in 2023, but yeah, you lose Brennan Thompson to the portal. You need someone who brings a ton of speed to the table. And the thing with Sategna has always been he is a world-class track athlete. So for those who don't know, his father is the head track coach at Texas A&M. His mother and father were track stars at LSU, if I remember correctly. And he has his own kind of standout track and field profile. Just really, really speedy. And when you watch him, that track speed does translate to the field. And so you're bringing this guy in essentially to make sure that you are able to either stress the defense vertically or stretch them vertically. And what I mean by that is either you are getting Sategna to blaze down the field and you're getting him a ball, or you're using this guy to clear space underneath because the safeties have to account for someone that fast who's on the field, right? And so it's something there that we've talked about in the past. You know, Emmett Jones likes to kind of recruit some role players to that receiver room. He likes guys who can do some different things, bring a little bit of a different profile to the table. And in Sategna, they kind of found exactly that. One of the best and fastest at the receiver spot that you'll find, and they're definitely going to have a role for him when he arrives in Norman.
Feels like this wide receiver room, it's finding its footing a little bit. It all starts with Deion Burks returning, like I've talked about a couple times already. But you're kind of looking around like, okay, you got Deion Burks, Jane Gibson, if he can be close to what he is. It's not like, I mean, these year two guys I feel like get a little overlooked. I mean, Zion Kearney year two, Zion Raggins year two, Ivan Carrion year two. Now you've had these portal guys, maybe more to come there in the portal. We'll see. But it feels like this room under Emmett Jones, which again had a rough year, not really anyone's fault, just kind of the way it went with all the injuries, and you were asking a lot out of guys like J.J. Hester and Brennan Thompson. It feels like the room, it's undergone a makeover, but you're looking at it like this position has got a chance to be a whole lot better. And it's all going to start with health, obviously, but it was a rough year for that spot. And I feel like I like the pieces that are kind of in place in Emmett Jones's position. So we'll see. But, I feel like there's reason to be optimistic about that spot after what was obviously a really frustrating year for that position. So on that note, so they have 7 guys in the boat in the portal cycle so far. The 4 we just talked about, of course, John Mateer, then Luke Baklenko, and the punter Jacob Ulrich. So that's 6 offensive players and a punter. Let's look ahead as for what is actually next. So they haven't made any additions on the defense yet. So that's a natural question. Do you think they will? As it's been all offense so far, which makes sense. I mean, the offense was the side of need, and that's where the majority of the losses have been in the portal, outside of just a couple guys on defense of note. What is kind of next for you in the portal after they've, a couple of guys we had talked about, they have missed on. So where are they kind of pivoting, and what are some names to keep an eye on for Oklahoma as they try to continue to add? And how many more guys do you think they will add? Because, Brent Venables talking about somewhere between 8 and 12. I just said they got 7 already. So, unless they go way above that number, they're probably getting close to wrapping this up. Where are you kind of at with what's left for Oklahoma to accomplish in the portal?
I still feel like they'll probably get to about 10, maybe more. I mean, the other part of this too is you have to account for more attrition coming to the roster. Not saying for sure, but you just never know, right? So definitely feel like double-digit territory is on the table. So as far as what's out there, we talked about Derek Simmons, a little bit of Luke Baklenko. Oklahoma misses on Corey Robinson, the former Georgia Tech left tackle. He was supposed to be visiting. He goes to Arkansas, and man, if you're Oklahoma, you really kind of wanted to do what Arkansas did. He actually tweeted out he was going to visit Oklahoma and then deleted it and ended up committing to Arkansas the next morning. That's a huge get for the Razorbacks. I give Arkansas a ton of credit. I got a soft spot for the Arkansas Razorbacks program, and they needed an addition like that, and they worked to get it done. And so where that leaves Oklahoma on the offensive line, I wouldn't be surprised if they took another guy there, honestly. I don't think that they're actively hunting for a third offensive lineman, but I also feel like long-term, it wouldn't shock me if they add another body to the front 5 room. And then another guy that they missed out on that is relevant to what's next, Nate Boerkircher, the former Nebraska tight end, ends up choosing Texas A&M, did visit Oklahoma. As far as what's going on there, I don't know,
dude. Because that's one that fans are gonna point to, the tight end room. What's going on? Because obviously Jake Roberts is moving on. His career is winding down. Bauer Sharp portaled out. He's at LSU. You're looking at that room like, all right, Devon Mitchell. That's where you're at right now with that position. And they've been in on a couple of tight ends, but nothing's really materialized. You got anything there to give it some hope? Because, I'm with you. I don't really know. It feels like that's a spot that doesn't have a great plan at the moment.
Moving on. Look, here's what I'll say real quick on it. I know what people want me to sit here and do. I'm not going to do that because I don't think that that's needed or necessary. They got to figure that out because, to your point, on the flip side, if you are Devon Mitchell, you're going
Will Smith
right here.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I have been hunting for answers today. Let me put it that way, and hopefully I really hope I can have more to Sooners Illustrated very soon.
Yeah, because Luke McGarry, the Tulsa tight end, he committed elsewhere. Like, it kind of every name that comes up as like this probably is where they're going to go, it ends up not going that way. So it's a fair question, obviously.
McGarry was supposed to visit Oklahoma, never got to campus. He committed Houston before he even visited Oklahoma. So, I don't know. Hopefully we'll know more on that soon. So, defensively, you brought that up.
Yeah.
Logan George, the edge rusher out of Idaho State, visited Wednesday and heard that visit went really well. I think Miguel Chavis did a really nice job here, kind of jumping in early, because you hear some of the names floating around this guy. Again, I know what people are going to say out there, Idaho State, but Ohio State and Texas A&M have publicly offered this player.
Right.
A few others are heavily in the mix. I believe Virginia's pushing hard to get him. So Logan George visits Norman, and I heard that went really well. I am keeping my eye on him on the defensive side of the ball at edge. And look, we haven't talked about it a lot, but it is kind of a really big need. Like, defensive end edge rusher for OU in the portal window is massive, because you're losing Ethan Downs, Trace Ford, and Caden Wooler. You've got to replace that production in those roles. Some of that veteran leadership as well.
It looks like you're getting R. Mason Thomas back. It sounds like everything's going well there, but what if what if you don't?
Yeah, if you don't get him, then Logan George would be really nice to have.
And again,
right?
It sounds positive for Oklahoma's side there, but again, you never know, right?
You don't want to count your chickens before they hatch the egg, So exactly. Sticking on the defensive line, let's talk about James Thompson real quick. The former Wisconsin Badger, got banged up last year, but was really solid in 2023. Was texting with some folks close to him. He was supposed to begin his visit yesterday, but flight delays, things of that nature, kind of held things up. They finally arrived at Oklahoma, and that visit is ongoing. Guy who I think a lot of people have talked about potentially maybe replacing like a Dejon Terry type. But when you look at James Thompson, I don't necessarily see that specific role, because he's about 6'5" and 295 pounds. So he's taller, longer, not like huge like Dejon Terry is, right? And so James Thompson's really intriguing to me. Tennessee really tried to get him to cancel this visit, Josh. Like, the Vols did not want him to go to Norman. He does end up at OU, and so we'll be tracking that trip going into the weekend. I've been asked a little bit about Washington State cornerback Ethan O'Connor.
Yeah.
I think Oklahoma is still very much in the mix there. I think that Miami really impressed him on the visit. I believe Colorado is kind of the other school floating around. Corner is another kind of sneaky need for Oklahoma. And so he has obviously visited OU already and a few other schools. I feel like a decision is forthcoming, but exact timing, I don't really know. And then just kind of other stuff that's gone on. Lucas, or David Gusta, I believe is his name. Pardon me. He's Washington State defensive tackle. So going back to the defensive line, hasn't visited, and to my knowledge, hasn't finalized the visit to Oklahoma, but he has heard from OU. And so the Sooners are in the mix there. He is a really talented defensive tackle, the kind of guy who will be available to go get a starting job at a number of programs. So kind of interesting. I'm curious to see how OU figures their way into that race. I believe Nebraska is pretty heavily in the mix. A few other big name programs have already reached out to him, but Washington State connection could help again for Oklahoma. And then Jerand Bradley, the wide receiver, going back to the offensive side of the ball. So he visited Oklahoma, everything going really well. Interesting situation, because you're like, okay, I think that they might lock this one down. And then for a moment there, it was like, okay, maybe things are going to play out a little bit. And then you start to hear, okay, a Kansas State visit this weekend. And then just crazy how these portal recruitments go. All of a sudden it was like, oh, Jerand may end up going to Oklahoma anyway. I messaged him before I hopped on the pod. He said Kansas State visit is still the plan. He wants to have something done and finalized by end of day tomorrow, if possible. So we'll see how this goes. Who knows? Maybe he ends up making his mind up today or even before this podcast is published. But as of right now, Oklahoma kind of in the top two with Jerand Bradley. And a lot of that, on a similar note, has to do with Devontae Ross, the Troy wide receiver who was going to visit and then didn't end up making it to Oklahoma. That kind of felt like one of their favorites in the portal window. And now I'm not really sure that anything's going to materialize there. So interesting situation. But the receiver spot, like, they probably only have one more scholarship remaining for the receivers in the portal window. So Jerand Bradley, a few other names out there in the mix for that final spot. And then let's show the specialists some love. The third phase of the game matters, folks. Doug Deacon.
Stand up.
Doug Deacon.
Yes.
This guy, he is the man. I mean, he gets Jacob Ulrich, who looking into him as a punter, the Kennesaw State punter, stud. Guy's a stud.
Yeah.
By the way, he's 6'5" and like 200 plus pounds. People are already calling him Sunshine. Doug Deacon getting a dude at punter who's going to bring some locker room morale. I like that, but he is now set to host another specialist for a visit. Lucas Carnerio, I believe is how you say it, from Western Kentucky. You and I were talking about him the other day, Josh, and he played in the bowl game. Was it Thursday? Wednesday.
It was right. They were finishing up right as we were recording John Mateer. Instant reaction. He was
crazy. Wild that he plays in the bowl game and then gets to Oklahoma like a day later, which I said on the site last night probably shows you the mutual interest here between Lucas Carnerio and Oklahoma. Looking into this guy, Josh, like this might be one of the better kickers in the country.
Missed one field goal this year.
Missed one field goal, was the Conference USA Special Teams Player of the Year. How about that? Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna say no. I'm a big CUSA guy myself, and so yeah, man. Oklahoma. Look, we've talked about this, but special teams, you never talk about it until it's a problem or an issue. And man, I think Brent Venables hiring Doug Deacon, that's been an ace addition to the staff, because what they did with Luke Elzinga and some of these developmental stuff with their kickers, and now going out and getting a guy like Ulrich at punter to replace Elzinga, who was a weapon for you this past year, and now working on a guy like Carnerio. Yeah, man, Oklahoma is making sure that third phase is taken care of. We'll see what they can do here, because I have heard that Carnerio will be one of the more coveted kickers on the market, but Sooners kind of hoping to maybe close some things down this weekend as he goes for a multi-day trip to Norman.
Yeah, I mean, I would think Oklahoma should know as well as anyone that you can't just take those specialist spots for granted. Like, we'll pick up someone and it'll be fine. Like, Luke Elzinga and then this year Zach Schmidt, after he took over from Tyler Keltner, did a really nice job. That was a big part of the team, especially in the second half of the year. And obviously all those guys are gone. Luke Elzinga Sr., Tyler Keltner Sr., Zach Schmidt Sr., and I know there's a lot of, hype and excitement around Liam Evans, who's just a freshman from right down the road in Moore. I'll say a local kid in that kicker room, but you still need like other guys. Like he's a youngster, and that you're losing two other kickers on your roster to graduation. So Carnerio, I mean, again, I looked into his numbers a little bit earlier today, and missed one kick this year. He's hit kicks of over 50 yards. Like, I mean, if you can kick, you can kick. I mean, there's the pressure, I guess, of bigger stage. That could be the argument, but there's no worry of like, can he translate to the SEC? Either he can boot it through the uprights or he can't. So, it would be a great
I've heard that other SEC schools are going after him, folks. If that is important context to you, sure. Several other SEC programs are apparently looking into this guy. And so Oklahoma doing its due diligence, to say the least.
100%. So they're hitting all areas. They've got a lot of offense. They're looking at some defense on the defensive line, even going after kickers and punters. They're covering all their bases in this busy stretch. And obviously there's, this window's got another week plus. It's the 28th when it closes, I believe. That's just for guys to get in the portal. It's not like you can't still add after the window closes. And then there's, of course, the post-spring portal window, which we'll get to do all this fun and shenanigans all over again after spring ball. But Oklahoma addressing some needs early on in the portal. They've hit the biggest one with the quarterback. They've got some receivers, some O-line help. They're working on some defensive, supplement the roster. We're not desperate on the defensive side, but you could use some bodies. And so far, I mean, the cycle, the class is kind of starting to find it a little bit. And as Oklahoma looks to continue to add to that group in this portal window. I think that's it. Do you have anything else? I think we covered everything pretty well. You did a pretty good job. You're at AT&T Stadium. You got guys walking behind you. You got the hoopla but I think he did a pretty good job staying laser focused.
Shout out to the couple random people that just decided to appear on the Sooners Illustrated podcast. I hope that they subscribe because I'm giving them some airtime today. But yeah, hey, real quick, Kip Lewis, I don't think that you watched, but congratulations. The Carthage Bulldogs won the state championship just before I hopped on.
Shout out, Kip.
I'll tell you what, man, Kip, I would love his take on some of those Carthage linebackers. They got some dudes in that second level of defense for the Bulldogs. Scott Surratt getting another state title, and we'll keep rolling through state championship weekend. We'll keep rolling through the portal. It's a lot going on, and I'm just glad I survived deep in the belly of AT&T Stadium because I did not know how this was going to go. So.
And it went pretty good. You got a pretty nice little backdrop there. It worked out pretty good. We squeezed it between the games.
You know, I knew I couldn't do the actual field behind me for noise and distraction, but also like copyright purposes. But what I really battled with is there is a bar right below me, and I thought maybe I vie for like a sponsorship opportunity at risk of getting yelled at by corporate with, so anyway, I'm glad we got it done, and a great way to spend my break in between games, and another great way to talk about everything that's going on in this transfer portal window, man, because it's been a lot. It's been a lot.
That's how Collin Kennedy's days are right now. He takes his break from work to do more work. That's how it goes. That's life of CK right now. But
that vacation in like mid-January, I'm hoping for is going to hit like a runaway train, brother.
Counting down the days. All right, I think that's it for now. We do have, I should have teased it earlier, James D. Jackson coming on the show. He's going to do a little in-state stuff as the high school football season has wrapped up here in Oklahoma. I'm sure he's got a little bit he wants to wrap up there as we close out the show. Then we'll be back on Monday for our final pre-Christmas edition. And then, believe it or not, a week from today is the bowl game. So we got to get our minds right and start shifting back into game week mode for Oklahoma and Navy next Friday. Down close to where Collin is right now, down there in Fort Worth for the Armed Forces Bowl. CK, appreciate you as always. I'm not sure. I guess we probably won't do this show next week with the holiday and the bowl game stuff, but I'll see you at the bowl. You're going to be there with us covering the bowl game, so we'll catch up with you next week. But I'm not sure when we'll squeeze in our next recruiting pod, but we'll find a spot.
Yeah, I mean, you're the boss, so you just tell me when I need to ramble on again about all these names in the portal and whatever else, and until that, maybe we reunite for an instant reaction in person. Is that the next pod that you and I are on? So the first instant reaction since you and I were in college.
I'm down.
Put that in the universe. So
down at M&G Carter Stadium. Gonna be a fun one. Looking forward to it. All right, I think that's it for now. We'll get James into the program now, do a little in-state stuff to wrap up here on the podcast right now. All right, we now welcome James D. Jackson onto the program. Comes on the recruiting show. Some in-state recruiting talk as always. Mm-hmm. James, the season is in the books for high school football. The final state championship games were over the weekend. Obviously, a few Sooners brought home some hardware. Kind of wrap up the season for us, man. Obviously, you were following it all season long with these Oklahoma guys in state. The season now officially in the books. Put a bow on it. I mean, what were kind of the major takeaways, the biggest stars? Just kind of wrap it all up for us as the 2024 season is now officially, finished up with all the champions crowned.
Mm-hmm. And first off, I want to say shout out to our analysis, at least you and me, because we've been talking about Elijah Thomas for the entirety of the season. Oh, yeah. He's underrated, even though he's a 4-star. He is the guy. And Gatorade and Max Preps have named him the player of the year just based on what he's done this season on both sides of the ball.
From
you go back
to Dakota.
Just
cool.
Small school.
Pretty
go back and look at his stats. It's been phenomenal. Just a guy like that, being able to have that, type of career as a solo guy, individual stats and things like that for that team. But as we go into the team side of it, obviously Carl Albert and the 3 Sooner signees win the championship once again. They are undefeated once again and really go back to back there and secure a 3rd title pretty much for that group. I mean, it was just
right.
Is it 9 and 10 years or 8 and 9 years, something like that? It's crazy. The amount that they've been able to do. And you talk about All-American Tristan Haynes, who's kind of the started off. He was the guy to pretty much jump it off in this championship game as they faced Guthrie with the 44-yard touchdown, just showing his speed, Josh. Like it's phenomenal what he's going to be able to do when he actually gets down there and talks with Jay Valai and works on the defensive back and things like that. He's awesome, man. The speed is uncanny, man. And the link that he has is why so many people and so many different teams were high on him, because you can't teach that. You can't teach his height,
Right.
his speed. It's just something that can't be taught. And then you go to Trane Washington, who had 2 interceptions for the Titans in this game. He is, as a safety, he's going to play tight end and wide receiver, so that shows that he can catch the football. That's really, really good to bring him down there. And Marcus James almost had 100 tackles this season after missing the first 3 games. So like that's a really, really good deal. I mean, you talk about those 3. They've shown that they can be productive at this level, which is a very high level in the state of Oklahoma, and they show that they can win and be a part of a winning culture. And so that's some of the good things that, kind of Brent Venables is going to bring out with these Carl Albert guys. And then you add Elijah Thomas, a guy like that, who's, I guess the best player in the state at this point, based on Gatorade and Max Preps and things like that. And then you go to some other guys too. I mean, you look at the rest of the unit, and CJ out there in Weatherford. I mean, he's a dual sport guy. I don't think he will be signing early, because I know he wants to get back on the basketball court for them and actually get over and win the championship. He's got them to the state championship title game the last 2 years, just missed out. So I'm sure he wants to get back on that. Those Carl Albert guys will all be enrolling early. They'll all be there as soon as possible to get down there and work out with the team. So that's one of those things you look forward to, but I mean, it was a great year for those guys. And, and you look at go down to Wagner and Alexander Shield Knight. Obviously, he hasn't had any type of changes since we last talked about him with his injury in the 9th week of the season. So that's still for him. So, I mean, that's where you're at with this signing group. It was a really, really good signing group. Some of the best in the state, top 5, you would say, of the players. You got 4 of those 5. I mean, it was really, really good in terms of in-state recruiting for Oklahoma.
Yeah, great year. No doubt about that. Elijah Thomas is just an awesome talent, and I'm really excited to see how quickly he can maybe get involved at Oklahoma. We were just talking about all the portal receivers they've added in this cycle with Collin. I mean, there's that room is, I feel like it's very up for grabs. You can work your way in there and that position right now. So I'm excited to see him, this spring and into next season, certainly. The Carl Albert guys too, what a season, what a career for those guys. And, there was some thought that like maybe, and Carl Albert's always Carl Albert. Nobody thought they were going to fall off a cliff, but, going into the year that was, okay, Xavier Robinson's gone. Kevin Sperry transferred away, will they still be what they typically are? And the answer is resounding yes. I mean, this was as dominant of a championship run as any of these. I mean, they never really were tested this season. Their defense just.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I looked at the stats. They gave up 5 touchdowns all season.
Just didn't give up points. Yeah, it's crazy.
Like it was crazy what they put together. And those OU signees played both ways, so they were a part of both sides of the football for them. They were all just pretty stout. You could not score on them, and that was the most difficult part for other teams. Like Guthrie, who had a pretty good season, didn't really score. They had 1 touchdown in the state title game. Like it's very hard to score on that team, and that's what really catapulted their season, because you talked about it. Kevin Sperry left. There's a quarterback. Xavier Robinson wasn't there. They're running back. So you rely on something else that really spearheads everything else, like the offensive side, and it just worked out, man. It was really, really good.
Unbelievable season for those guys, and it might be a little silly, but the success that Xavier had, especially toward the end of the year, gets you more excited about these guys. But it's like, okay, he did it. I mean, he came from that same program and came in and had an immediate impact and had some success right away. It kind of makes you, probably for those guys as well as us, everyone, kind of like it. We've seen it. A guy going straight from Carl Albert High School to Oklahoma and make an impact right away. So why couldn't they all do the same? Which is exciting. So. Great year for those guys. Awesome year in 2024, the 2025 class. Obviously, Oklahoma with a number of top guys that we'll be excited to see them in Norman here in due time. Some of them enrolling early, so we'll catch them, here just in a short little bit with winter workouts and things like that. As far as next year, as we start to turn the page, it's the 2025 season and the 2026 class, and even obviously some with 2027. There's some names we talked about already, but I wanted to ask you, and obviously we have a long time before the season, but as we start to turn the page, just kind of where does your attention kind of go as of now? What are some early storylines, headlines, names? Where is your kind of mindset as we kind of officially close the book on the 2025 class and start to look ahead to 2026 and even 2027 for these in-state guys.
I think OU fans should really pay attention to Caden Jones out there in Jinx.
Yeah.
He's a guy that has been he's very vocal about OU, seems like, because you look on Twitter or X and you see him responding to a lot of different things that happens with the Sooners. Like, he was telling the OU to go after Muskogee quarterback Jamarian Ficklin when he had, had his deal. He responded to, Jonathan Hatton decommitting from OU, who's also in his class. I mean, there's some things there. You want to watch out for him because he is a legacy guy. His father played at OU, and he is a very talented running back. I think he's the best running back in the state, just based on what he's done. He's leading. He ran for over 1,500 yards, close to 1,500 yards this season, and he is the leading receptions from a running back in Jinx history. Like, he's one of those guys that can do everything out of the backfield, and it's just like, this is the talent that you want. Somebody like this, and somebody who obviously kind of shows some, they care about this program, about the Oklahoma program. I mean, even if he's just doing that to just play about it, but it's like somebody who actually cares. I mean, it's somebody who's followed this program for quite some time. But you want to check him out. I think you want to look at Mason James, who we've been talking about for quite some time. Although I think, there's some bigger suitors like that are trying to get in on him as well, like Alabama and things like that. Those type of programs, you're probably going to have to fight for him at the end, because those programs are going to be in his ear. I mean, he's a guy that's a wide receiver that's really, really good out there in Norman North, but he's, in your state, in your city. Really want to get that guy because he's really good. So, I mean, those are some of the names you want to watch for this 2026 class. Tyler Overton is also a guy, really not sure where his head is at yet. It's just one of those things, because he's just really, really been picking up offers as of late. Like, this past season, it was really the explosion for him. So, just want to see where he's going to go from here and see what's going to happen, because he's got to narrow that down here pretty soon.
For sure. Another year of some really top end talent. And like you said, it's not just like these guys that Oklahoma is battling, Oklahoma State and some other, I mean, these are major SEC programs. It's becoming more and more with every passing year that are dipping their toe into Oklahoma, the talent in the state. It just seems like it gets better every year. It's really, really awesome. Feels like not that long ago that it was like, if anyone was going somewhere outside of OU, it was almost weird. And it was like that. That's where the best guys went, whatever the best guys were. Now there's so many that they can't all go to OU. Like, there's double digit legit Power 5 guys every year. It's cool. And it's another great season, and we look forward to getting on to 2026. Obviously basketball, high school basketball season's up and running with both boys and girls, and we'll, I'm sure, talk some of that over the next few months. But obviously a great football season, and we look forward to the next one. Kind of crazy. December.
Sure.
Wind down. There you go. Champions crowned. I think that's it. We're going to be back on Monday with James, Tom, and myself. Recap all the latest in the portal. We'll also be kind of starting to really look ahead. I mean, it's game week. We got to get our minds right as Oklahoma and Navy play a week from today. So we'll kind of get all set for that. James and myself will be heading down to Fort Worth, joining Collin, who'll be down there. So we'll be all at M&G Carter Stadium for that one. Should be fun. So we'll have a lot of coverage for that next week, starting with the podcast on Monday. So tune in for that as we wrap up the portal and get you all ready for Oklahoma and Navy in the Armed Forces Bowl next Friday down there in Fort Worth. For Collin Kennedy earlier, James D. Jackson, I'm Josh Callaway signing off for now. We'll see you next time right back here on the Sooners Illustrated podcast.